Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. My name is Leon Jones, and today is the second video for the year of 2023. If you want to continue to wish me a happy birthday during the season of Capricorns, check out the video I did on my birthday called Today is My Birthday. Happy birthday to me. And on that video, I thank everybody for the birthday wishes. Most of all, I thank everybody for supporting my channel. And this year is not going to be any different than any other year. Now, like I said before, we'll work on bringing back the Blog Talk radio show. And I'm going to do more pre-records this year. I will get into some live streams. If you look in my community tab, I put it out yesterday if I'm going to do a live stream or pre-recorded video. Now, today, I'm going to do a pre-recorded video, and I'm going to talk about the psychology of narcissism and OCD. So the psychology of narcissism and OCD. Let me share my screen and let's get into it. Now, what we're going to do when we talk about narcissism and OCD, we're going to identify the overlapping conditions. Now, the word narcissism seems to make people's ears perk up. There seems to be a lot of curiosity about how to identify a narcissist and how to deal with them. Now, I just believe this word narcissist, it gets used very often in American culture, and it's been used a lot here on YouTube. A number of individuals really don't have any idea of what it really means. Now, I have already defined the term on my other videos, and I've dealt with the NPD, which is a narcissism personality disorder. Now, I do hear a lot of people defining their former spouse or romantic partner as a narcissist. Now, it seems the second the relationship fails, then the other person's narcissist or narcissist tendencies were to blame. Again, when it comes to a relationship, it's both people to blame. It's not one-sided. Although when you hear a number of women, they love to blame the men. The bottom line is both of you were not made to be with each other, or you grew apart. That happens. You have to have the same goals. Now, I have to ask you this question though. How many times have we heard from our friends that their divorce attorney or therapist told them that their ex is a narcissist? Now, the problem I have with any attorney, particularly divorce attorneys and therapists, you have to watch them because they love to tip the scale for the female. So I just want to tell you this. When it comes to narcissist or narcissism, this verbiage also gets flung around to describe people who take a lot of selfies or put out a ton of TikToks. Again, when we talk about narcissism or narcissists, you hear a lot about this verbiage as it basically gets tossed around, and we identify people who take selfies or put a lot of TikToks on themselves on social media. Now, I will tell you, social media has created a lot of self-centered people. Now, I will talk about that in the next video, self-centered individuals. So I basically want to make it clear that none of this qualifies as actual criteria for a narcissistic personality disorder. So really what we're talking about, it's not narcissism. We're talking about people who are self-centered. That's different. Or selfish. They only think about themselves. So when we talk about narcissism, we have to go back and look at NPD, which is a narcissistic personality disorder. Now, a narcissistic personality disorder involves a long-standing pattern of the of one who is suffering, and what they need when they're suffering, they need to be admired by other people. So these individuals typically cannot handle critical feedback and have a grandiose sense of entitlement. So basically, people with the narcissistic personality disorder lack a sense of empathy for those around them, and they're very critical towards others. Why? Because they usually have a pattern of troubled relationships. So people close to the narcissist usually see them as bossy, difficult, rigid, and of course, unsympathetic. Now, again, as we deal with people who are narcissistic, I've already told you, they're ones who, in my humble opinion, I like to tell you this: they tend to be rigid. That's true. They tend to be bossy. I want to just surmise it with this phrase. We call them know-it-alls. They think they know everything. They think they're educating you, but the minute you're critical of them, they get very not sympathetic. They are easily offended. And that's the problem with this country. And sometimes when we deal with someone who is narcissistic, they can have an immature personality as well. And remember, I told you this, that some of these disorders, they tie into each other. We go from narcissistic, self-centered, schizophrenic. This is the fun of psychology and behaviors. And then you get to see the adjectives that describe the behaviors, like bossy and indifferent. I know the late brother Kevin Samuels. He had the acronym SIGN: shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be right. Well, if you think about that, that can be fit into individuals who are very troubled. And they believe that they're always right because it's really a defense mechanism. And they don't want to be told that they're wrong. This is the problem with individuals who are bossy, difficult. They're very, very rigid. Now, I'm not describing an actual narcissist. People usually view narcissists as bossy, different, real cold and rigid. Now, I will say someone who is self-centered, you can say they tend to be bossy because it's all about them. So, as I move on, people with NPD, which is a narcissistic personality disorder, are extremely resistant to changing their behavior. Again, if you know somebody who has a narcissistic personality disorder, you ask them to change. They won't change because they resist change. Why? Because they believe what they're doing is correct. Even when not changing their behavior is causing them problems. So, as with all personality disorders, it is typical with those around them that they have a problem with their behavior. Again, with any disorder, whether it's OCD, and we're going to get into that in a moment, when people have disorders, it's typically those around the narcissist who have a problem with their behavior, but not with the NPD sufferer. Let me frame that in the layman terms. It's like dealing with a smoker. See, if I don't smoke and I run into somebody and I tell them that smoking is bad for them, well, they're going to look at me like I'm funny. See, they're going to look at me like I have the problem when it is them who has the problem. So as I move on, you can look at that with the person who has NPD. Again, the person with the NPD is one who believes that you're the one with the behavior issues, not them, although they're the ones who are suffering with narcissistic personality disorder. Now, the NPD sufferer, of course, will blame all the people around them for their struggles. They will not view the situation as their fault. And in therapy, they will present as being critical of the people in their environment. So what happens? they basically tend to blame others. They don't want to take accountability for any of their actions. Now, we see a lot of that here on YouTube from men and women. They love to blame somebody. And the reason why they blame somebody is because what you're trying to do is make them feel guilty. This is where the sign language comes into play. So the people close to the narcissist will usually go along with the NPD. Why? Because they don't want to upset the NPD. Why? Because the individual's requests and demands, because it makes them easier than dealing with the consequences of going against the narcissist. Again, if you go against what the narcissist says, they could be easily offended, or they could be easily filled with hate and disdain. And they could label you as one who is discriminating them. So as we get into examples, let's give you some indication of what the examples mean. Well, an example of somebody with NPD and reacting to somebody with NPD. Again, we deal with individuals with the characteristics that people will label them as being bossy. I'm going to say a number of them are very difficult to deal with. Why? Because they're extremely stubborn and their behavior is irrational. So again, anybody who's close to the narcissist will usually go along with the NPD's individual requests and demands because it's much easier than dealing with the consequences of going against the narcissist. Some examples of how someone with NPD could react to another not doing what they asked might be you might get an extremely long lecture. You're going to get somebody who's basically cold and their demeanor is going to be very distant. Or something else, and this is where I call the immaturity into play, the silent treatment. Now, as I've laid everything out about the NPD, well, there's something called OCD. Now, with an OCD sufferer, also, they have NPD as well. It's different than the OCD person, however, without the NPD. Again, when an OCD sufferer also has NPD, it looks different than the OCD person without NPD. For example, when an OCD sufferer has an unwanted and intrusive thought that involves another person, they will usually be aware and empathetic to the idea that they cannot control the other person. They do not feel that others should be doing compulsions for them. Now, an OCD sufferer is someone who does not have the NPD agrees that their compulsive behaviors are annoying and upsetting around them. Again, an OCD sufferer who does not have NPD agrees that their compulsive behaviors are annoying and upsetting to those around them. Whereas the OCD individual with NPD operates under the philosophy that everyone around them should do everything and anything to make them feel comfortable. Now, generally, this type of person feels entitled and deserving of that. So basically, the NPD OCD person does not see a need to change their own behaviors. However, they feel that others around them should change. So if you think about that too, with some common sense, there's a little bit of denial going on with the NPD OCD, which is what is it? Occupational compulsory disorder. I believe that's what it is. If you're a mental health professional, if I'm wrong, put that in my comment section. So as I move on, when others do not change, they can be extremely enraged and excessively disappointed. For example, if a person has a client who meets the criteria for both OCD and NPD, he was a man in his mid-40s. He was obsessed basically with having clean floors in the house. He was unable to walk barefooted in his house, no matter how clean his floors were. He was extremely controlling of his wife's floor walking behavior. Again, let's just kick back and see how somebody who's got who's very compulsive, OCD, who has that. you're going to look at this person as this person goes for overkill. And when I was in the Navy, I thought a number of our chiefs and maybe some of the first class petty officers actually had that, because in the military, yes, I know we have to have the barracks or the ships clean, but some people, they want it perfected. I mean, we were made in boot camp to actually take a toothbrush and clean around the dirty toilets. We had to take a towel and shine brass on the quarterdeck many times, although it was clean. So people who have OCD, they're basically trying to be perfectionists and they can't. Because I can remember too, when we clean the sink in the bathroom in the military, you get one drip of water, that sink is dirty. You got to go back and clean the whole sink. So you can see how people with OCD are very difficult to deal with too. So going back to the example, I had a client who met the criteria for both OCD and NPD. He was a man in his mid-40s. He was upset with having clean floors in the house, and he was unable to walk barefoot in his own house, no matter how clean the floors were. He was also extremely controlling of his wife's floor walking behavior. He once saw her walking barefoot around the house. He demanded that she immediately wash and disinfect her feet before she would get into the bed. She, who typically was always compulsion compliant, forgot one day and got in the bed with contaminated feet. In response, he spent hours and hours talking to her about the pain she caused him. He spent the next month sleeping in another room and in another bed and ignored her for a few weeks. Now, also, if you think about what's connected to that too, hypochondria. So this person was actually thinking something had happened when it really didn't happen. Now, of course, when we deal with germs, they're always going to be around. What you try to do is reduce germs. But not only was it hypochondria, you can also say this person was paranoid. Now, again, as I move on, an OCD spouse who does not have NPD would also become extremely upset and uncomfortable at the notion of their wife contaminating the bed. However, this type of husband would most likely do a lot of compulsive behaviors himself, not involving her. In order to make himself feel comfortable, he might change the sheets. Also avoid his feet meeting hers under the covers, or he'll wear socks in the bed. There is a very good chance he would not say anything at all to his spouse. So, as I sum it up, the main difference is the OCD spouse who does not have NPD will not feel that his comfort is his wife's responsibility. Typically, he will feel compassion and empathetic toward his wife. He may think, my wife is exhausted and she needs to sleep. Now, the NPD OCD individual will not think this way. This person would not have any problem watching their wife change sheets and do their compulsions all through the night. So, there is treatment, but it can become complicated. So, when treatment for OCD becomes complicated, when there is a comorbid personality disorder, I utilize a combination of RIPR and CBT for personality disorders with these clients. So basically, couples and family therapy may also find this helpful, as well as dialectical behavior therapy, that's DBT. Again, couples and family therapy may also be helpful when it comes to dealing with somebody with OCD. They will find their family a good support. So I would always say this, and again, I'm not a mental health professional. I like to study mental health because we all have our fair share of issues. Now, again, for those who want to know what OCD is, that's somebody who is very obsessive. It's an obsessive compulsive disorder. Let me make a correction because I said obsession. No, it's an obsessive compulsive disorder. And when you have someone who is a narcissistic, who has a narcissistic personality disorder and an obsessive compulsive disorder, you're going to have some struggle on your hands because this person is going to be extremely controlling, or they could be as well schizophrenic. They could be paranoid. They could be stressed. You don't know what's going on, or they may not even feel good about themselves. So to feel good about themselves, they want to basically put others down. So basically, when we deal with the word narcissism, let's understand that a lot of people do use it wrong, particularly in American culture. And I always say this: blaming somebody does not qualify the person you're blaming as narcissistic. Now, could they be self-centered? That's true. So I'm just going to say this. You have to watch how you use the verbiage, because when you use something out of context, guess what? You change the meaning. You may believe you know the meaning, but you don't. And again, knowledge is power. So just going to say this. When we deal with psychology, we deal with the human behavior. And it is very important that you understand that we all have issues time to time, and all the issues tie into one another. Now, again, I just look at individuals who can be narcissistic and obsessive at the same time. These are the ones who are controlling. They could be irrational. And in the long run, this is where you have to utilize the go along to get along, so you don't make them upset, because they can be enraged or they could be extremely sensitive, however you see it. But the bottom line, the behavior is going to be irrational. There's also going to be paranoia tied into it as well. And just like the example of somebody stepping into bed with their feet, even if they had taken a shower, that's a placate for hypochondriacism, or again, I said paranoia. So for the most part, when you deal with somebody who's obsessive and narcissistic, they're very dangerous people. You're not going to get anything through them. So don't try to deal with these individuals, because these individuals, they're going to try to blame you if they have a problem, or they're going to try to look at you to see if you have the problem, even though it's not you, it's them. So by all means, if a person has OCD/NPD, have them seek help. Now, if they don't want to seek help, it's their choice. But if I were you, stay away from these people, because they can end up stressing you out. And remember, stress is the number one killer of human beings of all races. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you are looking for some educational content, particularly in the STEM area, check out the QCIS channel. On that channel, it'll give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Some of the subjects that I talk about: civil engineering, construction, industrial engineering, and of course, calculus. Now, if you cannot find me on YouTube, and I'm talking about the QCIS channel and a 401 Talk Zone radio show, those channels for those videos will also be posted on Twitter. Now, for the QCIS channel, I go one step further. Since it is an educational channel, you check that channel out on LinkedIn. And in the end, be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And if it doesn't apply, let it fly. But if the shoe fits, wear it. If you don't like the shoe, change it. Once again, that's my commentary here on the 401 Talk Zone radio show. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening. God bless you. I'm out.